Tim Brando, one of the voices on Fox Sports. You see him all the time covering and calling many Big 12 games, joining us on Heartland College Sports. Of course, we cover the Big 12, and we have a lot of Big 12 to get to, but my goodness. Let's start here, Tim. This coaching carousel continues to go bonkers. So grateful for your time. All we ask of this audience is to make sure they are subscribed to the channel, podcast, YouTube, radio. We're glad that they're here. We're glad you're here, Tim. You're right there in Louisiana. Brian Kelly is out. This coaching carousel is going to be like unlike anything we've ever seen. So how did we get here, and what's next?
Well, it's obvious, Pete, that the game has evolved. And I think about a year ago at this time, the thought process was coaches are staying put and fewer of them are being fired. And maybe it's because these buyouts are so big that, gee, we need to save this money because we got to pay the players too. Well, that theory is gone. I mean, completely. And it all started when Penn State did what it did after a 15-day period where they saw their team go from number 2 in the country to losing a game at home that they couldn't get past against Oregon, and then ultimately seeing James Franklin give the people that were not in his corner all the bank they needed after they laid an egg at UCLA and then lost another one. I mean, when you see that happen at a place like Penn State, and with a coach that, on whole, okay, I understand the record against top 10 competition and what had happened against ranked opponents and all that. But the man had been very successful overall, okay? And he had them on the precipice. Think about that, too. 1 or 2 plays go another way against Notre Dame, and I mean, they're in the championship a year ago. I mean, they were that close. But when that happened to him, I remember going out, and the next game we had that following week was with PJ Fleck and Nebraska. And I remember PJ saying 15 days, 15 days. That's all it took, 15 days. It's like, I mean, it was resonating with him. And I think it was with all of the coaches that are in positions similar to his, where you're in a big time conference with huge expectations. And the truth of the matter is, Pete, regardless of how big Penn State is, if you're in a conference seen as one of the halves, like the Big Ten and the SEC, it's like everyone's feeling it, okay? Even at a place like Minnesota, where it's clear, he doesn't have the same resources, not even close to the same resources at Minnesota that Penn State has. It's not just about the league you're in. It's about the school's administration. It's about the athletic director. It's about the donors, how many people from a collective standpoint have been involved. And I'm not saying they don't have collectives, and they do, but not on the same level as Penn State or Ohio State or, said big time schools that are spending a bankroll of upwards of $20 or more million a year. So I'm not shocked at what happened to Kelly, but I think the Kelly one is even bigger than the Franklin one because it is Louisiana, and because everything that happens in our state is magnified when it comes to football. It is from a political standpoint. My information from the jump in the aftermath of the game on Saturday was that coordinators were going to roll. Well, when the AD, Scott Woodward, got together with Brian Kelly, he wanted the coordinator gone, the offensive coordinator gone. Kelly wanted the O-line coach gone. They had an impasse, and Kelly just walked out. Well, once that communication between those two was severed, based on the information I had, Governor Landry got involved. He said, enough with this blank. We're going to make a change, and we're going to make it now. And the board of, the LSU board of supervisors, main members there, major donors, and Woodward were all summoned to the governor's mansion for a late evening get together. And it took a little longer than I think they wanted, but ultimately they decided, we'll find the money, get him the hell out of there, get him the hell out right now. And
Wow.
that's how it all transpired. And listen, politics and football in the state of Louisiana, and specifically at LSU, that's been part of it. Years ago, I went to many a board meeting when the former governor, John McKithen, put on an eloquent show at the firing of Jerry Stovall, who had been coach of the year before. And the athletic director at that time, Bob Broadhead, wanted to fire him and bring in his own guy, which turned out to be Bill Arnsparger, whom he had known with the Miami Dolphins. It was incredible to watch as a young Cub reporter then, and little has changed when it comes to that. Okay, little has changed when it comes to the involvement of politics and college football, specifically at LSU.
Is there a name that you think they target? I mean, you have some of the big names, Lane Kiffin. You have some Big 12 names, Kenny Dillingham getting attention. Is there an obvious place you'd go, Tim Brando?
This is the first place you go. Can you read that?
I think I can.
Yeah, I believe you can. That would be Nick Saban.
Is that Nick Saban? Oh my goodness.
That's where you're.
That's where you go.
My daughter was in school in 2003 at LSU when Nick was coaching. And obviously I was in the studio at CBS at that time. And if you remember, they played for the BCS championship and won it. USC got the AP trophy that particular year. And so there were two national champions that season. But I remember all too well the schedule for USC was so weak. And the BCS, as you know, was based on what? It was based on strength of schedule. And the strength of schedule for USC was not as strong as LSU's, and not even as strong as Oklahoma's. Oklahoma lost the Big 8 title or Big 12 title that year to K-State, and still played for the national championship in the BCS with the Heisman Trophy winner at that time, you may recall.
Mm-hmm.
White was the winner, and
Jason White.
They went down. Jason White and Marcus Spears had that pick six and put the game away, and LSU won the national championship. Listen, I don't think Saban's going to take the job, but that's where the first call goes. That's where the first call goes, and I'm pretty sure the call's already been made. Now, his wife has said for years, Miss Terry, as he lovingly refers to her, that the biggest mistake they ever made was leaving Baton Rouge. Now, obviously, it all worked out 2 years later after they don't get Drew Brees as a free agent, and wind up having a 500 season with the Dolphins in year two. He left for the Alabama job because the Alabama job was open, and we know what happened after that. But how history would have changed when you think about it, had he gotten Brees, okay, and not listened to the medical doctors with the Dolphins and taken him. The Saints wind up winning a Super Bowl in 2009, about 3 years later, and Saban's on his way after becoming the head coach his first season, the 2007 season. He's on his way to winning his first national title that same year at Alabama. But down deep, he's got a lot of friends, and he knows all of the inner workings of the LSU political system. And I don't think he necessarily wants to coach again. I don't think he's lying when he says, I don't want any part of that. But when Jimmy Sexton calls, I don't want him to talk to my wife. Sexton owns the entire SEC coaching fraternity. Ironically, Sexton did not manage Brian Kelly. It was Trace Armstrong that was the agent for Brian Kelly. But just about everybody else, Kiffin, Kirby, all of them are under the Sexton umbrella. I believe that Nick will help them. I believe that privately he will help them in terms of directing which way they may want to go. So you'll probably be hearing soon his plane was seen or somebody saw Saban and that. You'll be hearing some of that. I don't know the truth of it, but I do know that he will be someone they'll turn to get some guidance, to get some help. Clay Travis has mentioned they could offer him $100 million for 4 years. Nice thought from Clay, but I do think that he's past it now, and I don't know that with the money that they just got through paying Orgeron, and they're now on the hook to pay Kelly, that the one donor that's making sure that state funds aren't being gerrymandered to pay off Brian Kelly, I don't know that they can come up with enough Fortune 500 company leaders to pay off both Brian Kelly and then hire Nick Saban for $25 million a year. So I think that's a bit of a pipe dream, but that's the first call. That is the first call. I've got some thoughts. My three that I think are legitimately gettable, and they would be wise to call. Joe Brady, who was the offensive coordinator in 2019, still a very young man and now dialing up plays with the Buffalo Bills. They may win a Super Bowl. Might take a while to get to him, okay? But I think Joe Brady could wake up the echoes from that Orgeron 2019 team, and he was a real difference maker. You know, Joe Burrow, look up the stats on Burrow pre-Joe Brady. That was nothing to write home about. That's one. The other guy that I think makes a lot of sense because Dan Lanning is not going to go. He's not leaving Oregon. I was just there last week. He's happy. He's going nowhere. He's on every AD's hit list, but he's not leaving. The next best thing to him is Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State. Now, would Kenny leave? Because I think that's home. It's a destination job in his heart that he wants to be at Arizona State. But if he stays at Arizona State, they're going to have to pony up because I think LSU would come after him hard, really hard. And the third, and this is my outlier, PJ Fleck of Minnesota. I think that PJ, with resources, with his energy, you know, a lot of people didn't buy into the whole row the boat thing, but go back and look at his record. And they get 3 stars there. They don't get 4 and 5-star players, but they consistently win 8 to 9 games. And before last week's loss, I thought they might get to 10 with a bowl victory because they looked so good against Nebraska in the game I had on that Friday night a couple of weeks ago, and they got just rolled over by Iowa. I don't know what's happened to the Hawkeyes. They're one of the incredible stories this season in college football. But I think PJ is legit, and if he were in a position where the resources were all there, it's amazing what I think he could accomplish. So those are 3 guys that I think are a lot more realistic than the whole let's call Nick, let's call Urban, let's call John Gruden, which you're hearing all of. You know, you're hearing all about that. And the whole Lane Kiffin thing, I think, is also a pipe dream because Sexton knows what that situation is at LSU is like. And even though he could pull it off for him, why would Lane go to a place where 2 years after, not even 2 years after a national title, Orgeron, you're out of here. Brian Kelly wins 70% of his games, fired mid-season. Listen, what he's doing at Ole Miss, he can do at Ole Miss just as easily as he could in Baton Rouge and just as easily as he could at Florida. But if you have one bad season at either one of those places, the level of toxicity within the fan base and the expectation levels are so high, you're gone. You don't get to hang around. At Ole Miss, you could just win an SEC championship and they build a statue for you. And, you know, they haven't even gotten to Atlanta yet, you know, in the history of the school since the playoff began in 1992. I think Lane means it when he says he loves it there, that his ex-wife has joined him, that his kids are loving it. His son Knox is now a starting quarterback, winning football games at Oxford High School. He said to the Florida people when he was asked about the Florida job last week prior to the Oklahoma game, he had just won on Friday night. He said, well, if dad leaves, I'm not. That's what he said. So I don't think Lane's in a position right now to bolt for another SEC gig. That's just my opinion, but it's a fairly strong one founded on what I think I know. And some fans would argue what Brando thinks he knows.
There you go. Tim Brando's
Yeah.
joining us here on the show. I love it. Well, you mentioned Kenny Dillingham. Let's touch on the Big 12 here for a few minutes and look at this league right now. Maybe it's not as wide open as last year, but it once again has surprises at the top. Cincinnati, BYU. You look at the way this year Houston is shaking up. It is just an amazing ride in this league once again, unpredictable. What is your read as we've crossed the halfway mark on the Big 12 and where the final month of this season goes, Tim?
Well, first off, I never thought that saying BYU beat Iowa State the way they beat Iowa State in the second half last week, that they would be in the aftermath of the Holy War in a position to be undefeated, and that having an undefeated BYU would be in the best interests of the Big 12. But as I look at the framework and the rest of the season, who's playing whom the rest of the way, particularly with the caveat that both Jordan Tyson and Sam Levitt were out of that game last week, which was a very difficult loss for them to take at Sun Devil Stadium, Arizona State. And apparently he's in a boot practicing today, Levitt, and won't play this week. So with that in mind, I think the Big 12 actually is in better shape for BYU being undefeated now, okay, than they would have been had Iowa State knocked them off, which frankly I expected to happen. I was a little surprised that Iowa State didn't get it done with the open date before it, playing back at home. It's not Rocco's fault. I mean, he's played really well. They've just had some real big issues giving up big plays on the defensive side, which is a little bit of a surprise too, with the job that John Haycock has done historically there. But I think BYU staying undefeated right now is great for the conference because let's say whether it's Utah or Texas, it could be Texas Tech. Texas Tech would be probably the team that I should mention first and foremost. If Texas Tech gets its act together, continues to win, and that only loss is the one that they had to Arizona State, then I think there's a very good chance that despite an opportunity for Texas Tech to win the Big 12 title against an undefeated or one-loss BYU team, if Texas Tech lost that game and it was just their second loss, because of where they've been and because of the consistency that they've had most of this season, also with an injured quarterback much of the year. Baron Morton didn't start. Will Hammond had to start. Hammond had to come in and help save him in a game. I think that Texas Tech and BYU are both viable playoff teams if that scenario were to play out. Now, if it's any other team besides Texas Tech, possibly Utah, if they were to play out, let's think about the potential of a crazy Holy War Chapter 2. Wouldn't that be wild if we got that in the Big 12 championship? But if it did, Pete, and Utah happened to win that rematch, how do you leave BYU out?
Yep.
I mean, how do you leave BYU out? So I think that the SEC is busy looking like the Big 12 of old. Okay, they're killing one another off. Okay, I see multiple losses for all the teams in the top tier that are still having to play one another the rest of this season. Oklahoma is in a must-win mode this weekend. I mean, an absolute must-win mode, and other teams are too in the SEC. A 9-3 anybody out of the SEC, I think, is in peril. I don't think a 3-loss team this year is going to get out of the Southeastern Conference. So 2 losses, I think, is all you can muster right now and survive. But with the balance that we see in the SEC, everybody there having 2, the potential for there is for that happening in that league is clear in my view. So I think it's an advantage for the Big 12 to still have an undefeated team right now.
No doubt.
By comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me ask you this, Tim. I mean, you love and you know the sports media landscape as well as any. There were certainly conversations around Big 12 country the last few days regarding ESPN and College Game Day. Hadn't been to a Big 12 game or a Big 12 campus in 3 years. They're coming this weekend to Utah, Cincinnati. Big Noon Kickoff does a great job as well, but, you know, Game Day's been around longer, so it just gets a little more attention at times. A lot of people pointing back to that ESPN relationship between the network and that conference. So how should Big 12 fans read into this relationship, which includes ESPN, Fox, TNT's in the mix? What does this look like, and how should Big 12 fans interpret it?
Well, I'll begin by saying, Game Day for its history has always been pretty good about going to where they believe the best games are, regardless of what network may be carrying the game. I remember in 2018, I was out in Oregon, out in Pullman with Washington State, and they finally came to Wazoo after all those years with the guy that used for 25 years came with the flag to Game Day, just trying and hoping and praying to get him to come. They actually came for that game that night, and Gardner Minshew put on a show against Herbert, and I believe Oregon was ranked maybe around 16th, 17th, and certainly Wazoo was doing well with Mike Leach. It was Leach's best team. They would ultimately lose the Apple Cup game and not have a chance to play in their championship game in the Pac-12 at that time. But the truth is, since Big Noon came along, and that's been since that time, since 2018. Okay. I think Big Noon's presence has played a role in College Game Day's decision making as it relates certainly to the Big Ten. And I think whether they know it or not, subconsciously or consciously, they've decided to ignore the Big 12. I mean, BYU has been in the witness protection program for the last 3 weeks. And Bear Bachmeier is one of the most amazing stories at the quarterback position in college football. I mean, here's a kid that it looks like he hasn't maybe lost quite all of his baby fat. He's so young. Okay. We're talking true freshman. Now, listen, I'm not saying he's not in shape. I'm saying he looks young. That's all I'm saying. Okay. So I don't only get any cards and letters or tweets. But the reality is, Bachmeier wearing the number 47, that's another intriguing aspect of his story. And also the brother of a former Bachmeier that we remember playing in college football. And I met that kid. I got to know him fairly well before he transferred, and out at Boise. This is an amazing story that has been totally ignored by the worldwide leader, and it's very unfortunate. And if I'm Brett Yormark, I'm saying to myself, wait a minute. We just did a deal with you guys, and I think fans need to understand this. Fox is also a television partner of the Big 12. In fact, we are the lesser partner. Okay, if you go to the contract, you'll see we're not switching first choices week to week anymore. We pick after ESPN picks on a weekly basis. All right, on a weekly basis. So this week, we've got a couple of games that are on our air on Fox or FS1. If the World Series gets done in 5 or 6 games, the game that Devin and I are supposed to do between Colorado and Arizona will be moved from FS1 to Fox. If there's no weekend, Saturday programming of World Series baseball. But ESPN gets the better game every week in this new television deal. Why aren't they covering the Big 12 like, a television partner should cover one of its primo partners that we have? I mean, I get the fact that the SEC is its premium partner. I get that. The Big Ten is ours. Okay. But I think there have been times when we've certainly shown some love to the Big 12 that heretofore ESPN has not. In the decision making with certainly Big Noon Kickoff and bringing our signature broadcast and that studio show to the campus there. If I'm Yormark, I'm on the phone to Burt Magnus right now, and I'm saying, what the hell do we have to do to get you guys to show up? Now, look, those shows are, in my view now, and I have, I have a lot of love for my time at ESPN and the formation of College Game Day. So treated our history very, very nicely. So I don't begrudge any of those that are making the decisions of doing whatever they feel is in the best interest for their company. But your question was, do the Big 12 people have a right to be pissed off? Yes, they do. I mean, they do. And I would be urging Yormark to say, hey guys, proof's in the pudding here. Where are you? I don't understand this. Why aren't you here? We've got some stories to tell, big time stories to tell. And to this point, you really ignored them. I mean, I'm not saying they haven't mentioned BYU. Sure they do. They go over every game. They have the pick'ems and all that stuff. I mean, but when we talk about covering it, hey, introduce us to some of these guys. Tell us more about what's going on with a program like BYU that has rich history that's overlooked in so many ways. So yeah, they absolutely have the right to be pissed off.
I know you got to run, Tim Brando. Last thing in the final minute, Jimmy Sexton. You talked about him earlier. How do people end up with these massive buyouts? I mean, I'm a capitalist, but these buyouts are wild, Tim Brando. How does this sport continue to do this?
The lawyers that represent the universities are not people that finished first or second or third or fourth or even 20th in their class. Okay. They're big corporate, law firms. And they put some of their least experienced people on the job for these deals to go over them. And ultimately, whether it's the donors that are involved financially or if the state gets involved, when it comes to the buyouts, they're asleep at the wheel on them. Absolutely, completely asleep at the wheel. How Scott Woodward, and I know Scott, and he's politically connected. Went to Catholic High in Baton Rouge, went to LSU, loves LSU. He was in school there when I was calling Dale Brown's games in the early to mid 80s. I think he got out around 86. So he's connected there. But if you look at what he spent on Jimbo Fisher at A&M before he took the job, and what he spent on Brian Kelly after paying off Ed Orgeron, all right, which, by the way, I think in December, Ed gets his last check from that deal, which was over $17 million when he exited, okay? And you look at, I mean, we're talking a quarter of $1,000,000. No, we're looking at more than $250,000 of payoffs to coaches of football. The last two hires that he made, Jimbo Fisher and Brian Kelly. Now, they may negotiate it down, Scott. I mean, they may, Scott may be able to negotiate it down to, let's say, 30 million instead of 54, but we'll pay you the 30 right now. Okay. Yeah. Here's a $30 million cash payment. Take it and get out of here, because the guy that's going to pay him's got that kind of liquid cash that he can turn to. But I mean, Pete, that's pretty pathetic. That these athletic directors are really good at spending somebody else's money.
Yeah,
that's why it's happening.
Yeah,
that's why it's happening. Hey, I'll write you a check, no problem. All I want is this fan base to get off my ass. I'll write you whatever check you need, Jimmy, and Jimmy wins. Sexton is the maestro pulling all the strings, and the ADs are all puppeteers, particularly in the SEC.
He's like the lobbyists taking the politicians for a ride. They're great with other people's money, Tim. ADs and politicians. They are great. Right. Tim Brando, great to have him on. You'll be watching him across Fox with the Big 12 games as well going forward. Tim, thank you for joining us on Heartland College Sports.
Happy to be on with it, Pete. Always. You know that.
All right. There you go. Tim Brando. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you soon. Talking Big 12 on HeartlandCollegeSports.com.